Welcome to the Vantage Fit Corporate Wellness Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Fit, the all-in-one AI-powered corporate wellness platform developed by Vantage Circle.
Food addiction can be stated as a behavioral addiction. Scientists believe that food addiction is one major cause of obesity and many other health-related issues. But one can break the cycle and return on track, leading a healthy lifestyle. Hello and welcome to another episode of Vantage Fit Corporate Wellness Podcast. I'm your host Dipshi, and today we're going to discuss on a very interesting topic, breaking the cycle of food addiction. Today we have with us Dr. Bunmi Aboaba, an international renowned food addiction coach, to discuss on this. She is a certified food addiction counselor and founder of the Food Addiction Academy. Dr. Bunmi's work covers the full spectrum of disordered eating, including overeating, compulsive eating, emotional eating, addicted eating, and other associated patterns. Welcome to the show, Bunmi.
Thank you very much, Dipshi.
We are so glad to have you here today.
Thank you.
So before beginning with the topic of today, can you please tell us a little more about yourself and your journey as a food addiction counselor?
Okay, thank you, Dipshi. My journey to food, becoming a food addiction counsellor, really started from my own experience, and safe to say today that I'm 15 years free from food addiction. But it started when I was very young, and food is very much part of people's past history. Relationships with food stem back to childhood, even as young as 2 years old. And I remember when I was about 5 or 6, my parents worked full time. So they went to work. From the age of 6, I kind of went to school on my own with my friends, and I had a key and I would let myself into the house when at the end of school. So I'd go out and play with my friends and go back into the house. And my parents worked full time, and they were really good because they would leave me snacks in the evening when I got back from school. But I found that it was a comfort. So having my snacks was a comfort when I was doing my homework, and then I would look in the pantry again and find more food. So for me, food, especially things like biscuits and cakes and things like that, became my reward, my comfort, my best friend. So for me, food was very much a relationship with comfort, with safety, with security. And that was very much the thread through my life, that if I was stressed at all or had a bad day, then I would turn to food. So for a few years, everything was absolutely fine. But that was my relationship. And other people have, relationships with food stemming from childhood, and it could be different. It could be, for instance, they were rewarded with food for being good, or they were punished and not having food because they've been naughty. So there's lots of different influences. So with my story, that's basically what it turned to, was just reaching out for food, and then getting to a place where it got out of control. And when I was about 14, 15, when I was doing my kind of first exams, and education was very important to my family and to myself. The stress of doing very well, getting my grade A's, I turned to food quite a lot. I would binge and then make myself feel sick. And then sort of going through the years, food has always been that kind of attraction for me, until to the point where back in 2008, I think was the worst time I had, where I was binging all the time. I couldn't stop. I was in a very stressful profession, and I found I couldn't stop. I could not stop. And that's when I realised something was wrong. I tried several times to stop binging and eating and, at any particular time, but I found it very, very impossible until I got the support that I needed. And I kind of found my own way to really tame food addiction in my life. And today I just feel so happy and so relieved that I don't have to think about food. I don't have to binge and make myself feel sick. So that was my history. And I wanted to help other people experiencing the same difficulties, because it's not just the case of just stop eating. Your brain is now wired to addictive eating.
Exactly, like from being a foodie yourself to becoming a food addiction counselor, I believe you have come a long way, and it's very inspiring. Not everyone can do it, actually.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, but it's possible.
Definitely. So, like, yes, that determination, that dedication is all you need, right?
I think the determination is discipline, and it's also getting a lot of support and a lot of compassionate support. Because, as I say, when people are suffering with, for instance, obesity or diabetes and other chronic health conditions, that many say, well, you know, just stop eating what you're eating. And it's easier said than done, because we have to now rewire the brain to stop the addictive eating and to reduce it. So, you know, the brain has already established this pattern of binge eating or emotional eating. And so we have to kind of change that neural pattern. And that's done with several different processes, which can be successful. But the person, needs to be disciplined in doing that.
Like bringing that control is very difficult, I believe. Don't you think?
Bringing the control is difficult. But once a person, you see, the thing is that up till kind of recently, we've never particularly understood why we can't stop eating or stop drinking or stop doing things that are obsessive. And once a person understands what's going on, and many people are very interested in what's going on with their brains, and you explain to them in a very simple way what's happening, and they get it, and they think, oh my goodness, that's what it is. That's why I can't stop. What do I need to do is normally the next question. And so slowly, with very simple processes, but done as a habit, we're breaking the habits. So we're installing good habits to replace the bad habits. And after a while, the bad habits get quieter and less, and the good habits become predominant.
Now, like when we're talking about food addiction, so can you tell us a little bit more about the concept, and what are some of the common signs and symptoms that suggest someone may be struggling with it?
Okay, so food addiction is, I would say it's pursuit of a mood change with food. And after a while, the certain foods are usually ultra-processed foods, cakes, sweets, biscuits, things like that have what we call, it's got a combination of fat, sugars and salts in the ingredients that spike the dopamine in the brain. So what happens when somebody starts to eat a certain food, it spikes the dopamine. And it's called ultra-processed foods, and it makes you feel good. It makes you feel really good, more so than, say, real food, whole food. And the dopamine goes off, the serotonin, that feel-good transmitter, goes off, and the brain starts to recognize this food makes me feel really good. This feels great. So the brain will start to attach different emotions. So if you're feeling bad, the person may reach for that particular food again because it makes them feel, better. Or if they're feeling angry, they might reach for food. So it starts to take over. So that particular types of food, the ultra-processed foods that spark off food addiction, start to take over the pathway. So a food addict finds it very, very difficult after a while then to stop eating those particular foods because of the sensations, because it makes them feel good. And even after a while, despite physical issues such as obesity or diabetes, they're still finding it very difficult to break. They know that these foods are now not good for them, but they still find it hard to stop eating those particular foods. And mentally, it becomes an obsession. So they become obsessed about these particular foods. They what we call have an obsession, a preoccupation about finding the food, buying the food, eating those particular foods, and they find it really, really, really hard to break the habit and stop eating them. So that is what we call food addiction.
And is stress eating related to food addiction?
Stress eating is related to food addiction. So stress eating is what we call emotional eating. That's another term for it. And if somebody is the primary coping mechanism for their stress is reaching out for food, then if it's a chronic stressful event or a chronic stress life they have, then they will keep eating particular foods to make them feel better. But then after a while, it stops working. So the person needs to eat more and more to try and achieve that feeling of comfort again, of peace. So they try harder and harder and harder, but find it's difficult. So with emotional eating, then it will turn into a food addiction if it's not stopped or recognized.
Exactly. So I believe stress eating is a part of food addiction.
It is. So let's put it this way. Food addiction is like the top of the spectrum. The bottom of the spectrum's overeating. And along that way, we have overeating, we have emotional eating on that spectrum. Then we have bulimia, we have binge eating, and then we have food addiction. So that's the full-blown thing. So the top end of the spectrum is food addiction. The bottom end is overeating. So an overeater can go through this chain of emotional eating and then maybe binge eating and then food addiction.
What commonly triggers food addiction, and how can individuals identify and avoid them to manage their cravings and maintain a healthy relationship with food?
Okay, so with food addiction, the signs are being preoccupied with the food. You know, a perfect example is some of my clients wake up in the morning and they can't function until they've had maybe a donut or cakes, or they're constantly obsessing about the food. They're constantly thinking, I need to have this food to make it feel a certain way, or a habit. And I'm not going to be able to get through the day until I've had that food. And it could be they'd be thinking about the food in the morning, they may go to work, but they think, right, by lunchtime, I really need that, you know, and they get irritable. They may have mood swings, but don't forget, you know, with you know, high amounts of sugar and fat and salt, with mood swings, that people with food addiction can suffer from mood swings. They have a big high, they eat that food, then they crash. So they may have a sugar crash, and then they feel low and irritable and anxious until they've had that food again. Then they feel okay. They start to crave the food. So they might think, I need this food now I have to have it. So that's the craving. And with cravings comes anxiety. They feel this intense hunger all of a sudden. They can't focus. Family life starts to...
Too much salt, like I mentioned, too much salt or too much sugar can lead one towards food addiction, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, people can be addicted to sweet and creamy things, or salty, for instance, because of what we call the food manufacturers are very, very clever, because they make the combination such that it spikes the dopamine. So food manufacturers create what we call bliss points, where it's the perfect ingredients of fats and salts and you know, sugars and salt and the texture, so that crispy things are more-ish. You want to eat more of them, or sweet things are more creamy and delicious, and so you want to eat more of that. So it's point, once they reach that bliss point where there's a maximum, that person's food was really good. So that's what happens with foods that are manufactured. So we're looking at ultra processed foods. We're looking at things that they're not real foods. Real foods, people don't have addiction to salad or an addiction to eggs. It's just particularly manufactured artificial foods which do cause this problem.
Like, are there any evidence-based treatments or strategies that can be used to overcome food addiction, such as therapy, support groups, or lifestyle changes?
Yeah. Yes, there are therapists. I mean, here in England, we have eating behaviour psychologists. We have food addiction counsellors now, which I'm one of them. I'm European board certified. There's 1,000 of us worldwide now, because we're now recognising that this is a huge, huge, huge problem globally. So there's that. There are dieticians and nutritionists who recognise now that food can be addictive. And it's been a very slow process, but the articles and experiments and everything now is definitely irrefutable that there's sugar addiction and there's food addiction. So there's therapists. There's also support groups. So, for instance, here in England, we have Food Addiction Anonymous, we have Overeaters Anonymous, and we have other peer support groups where people help each other. And then what a person can do for themselves is, first of all, recognise, number one, can I do without this particular food? And the experiment would be to see how they feel if they couldn't eat that particular food that makes them feel good and they can't stop eating. And if they're finding it difficult, if they're finding it a stress that they can't have it, then there is a problem. There is a problem. And that's how we kind of say, if you can't particularly do without that food, then we know there's a certain level of addiction or obsession around that food. And what I would suggest we do bit by bit by bit is creating a daily routine where, number one, good night's sleep. Because when we have a good sleep, our stress levels go down. Make sure that we're hydrated, because when we're hydrated, so these are simple things, proper hydration, making sure that you're drinking right through the day, that kind of lessens that feeling of having to eat a particular food. Things like just little rituals, for instance, making sure you have your breakfast, a nice breakfast in the morning, not going hungry. So having a normal breakfast with whole foods, like eggs or bacon or, anything like that, anything that's going to make you feel full. So there's more protein in the diet and more natural foods. And then 3 to 5 hours later, having lunch. And again, a natural lunch. And then 3 to 5 hours later, having your dinner. So making sure that you're not going hungry, so the brain starts to settle down. Okay. Keeping stress levels down. So we're looking at stress management techniques. So if a person's got chronic stress and they're always reaching for particular foods, then things like learning to go for a walk, getting outside in the sunshine, going for a nice gentle walk, breath work, meditation, mindfulness, all of that is designed to calm the brain down, so it doesn't start wanting to have these foods to help. So calming the brain down with these things like yoga is really good. Finding a support circle, so when you're finding it difficult, that you have people who understand you and support you and encourage you. When things feel a bit tough, so picking up the phone to someone, saying, look, I really want to reach for the big bag of chips there, but I'm finding it difficult not to. Then by the time you've had a conversation with a friend or a support friend, that feeling disappears. Having snacks like fruit or vegetables, chopping up carrots or cucumber, so that when
healthy food options,
healthy food options. So when you're feeling that hunger coming again, that you want to eat a particular ultra processed food, then those snacks are really good. So having the snacks and preparing your food the day before, because then you know what you're eating the next day and it's prepared. And I think preparing your meal for the next day, I think is important, because then you don't have to think, oh, what am I eating today? Oh, I'm going to have those burgers or that chicken, fried chicken. You can have everything is laid out for you, so that your brain doesn't have to think. It's already there. It's already made. So pre-preparing, I think, is really important. Making sure you have healthy snacks to eat, making sure that you're hydrated, because hydration, thirst and hunger are very similar sensations. So when you become thirsty, you may think you're hungry. So making sure that you have your bottle of water that you're sipping through the day, making sure your stress management levels are well practiced, because it's all right talking about doing breath work when you're stressed, but then when it comes to that stress, you don't do it. So I always say to my clients, practice all of these things every day anyway, because when that crisis happens, you can automatically go into your breath work, go into mindfulness or meditation, just to bring your stress levels down. So I think that's important. If there's certain things, like certain environments, so don't be always walking into a shop full of ultra-processed foods. Try to kind of be mindful of that. As I said, if you're stressed, then with your mental health, the breath work is good. Talking to a friend, listening to music. So like get a lovely playlist together that's going to calm you down. Get your playlist on. Look at your affirmation. I like mantras, for instance. I am healthy, I am well, my body deserves to be healthy and well. All little affirmations are really good. Put them on your computer or put them on your phone to remind yourself. So all these little bits and pieces, when you put them together, really makes your day feel wonderful, and you start to not reach for those particular foods. Then you start to recognize, you become more aware of yourself. So you start then to take care of your emotional self, your inner needs. What is it that upsets me? Okay, how am I going to deal with that instead of reaching for food? If a person's upsetting me, do I need to talk to them? Do I need to be their friend? Can I walk away? So it starts you start to look at life on life's terms without reaching for ultra-processed particular foods that you're going to not stop eating. So it starts to make you aware of yourself, who you are as a person, how you move through life. And that's really important, is the self-awareness. What are you really hungry for? What are you sad about? Let's deal with that. What are you angry about? Let's deal with that. And we can deal with all those things without reaching for food. So it's definitely unpacking that process through helping a client so that they become, happier, healthier. They know themselves more. They can navigate through life much easier without binging and causing detriment to their physical and mental and spiritual health. So it's a spiritual, mental, physical problem. We have to deal with all aspects within that person. It has to be holistic. It can't be just stop eating that. We have to deal with what else is going on with that person.
Like everything is related.
Everything is related.
One affects the other, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Your spiritual health is important, but that's affected if your mental and your physical health's not good, and the other way around. So we're looking, my wish for everybody who struggles with food addiction or anything along that spectrum is to have a wholeness, to feel whole again, to feel happy again without reaching for the particular food to make them feel better, so that they've got that inner peace, that inner happiness. And that's the whole thing. And I think the spiritual aspect is not really looked at as much as it should be. And as I said, I use the whole three, and many of the kind of support groups that we have in the UK are very much mind, body and spirit. It's the whole package. You can't just say stop eating that when mentally that person is suffering. We have to address what's going on, and spiritually as well.
So basically one has to be aware of their physical and mental wellness, and then they have to take one step forward, like one step at a time towards towards achieving the goal. Yes, exactly.
And it's a day at a time, but it's creating a nice safe structure and a nice daily routines and daily rituals to really kind of make that person feel safe. And then we're looking at a food plan. I always suggest a food plan. So with my clients, they have a food plan where we kind of look at what, their breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and we create that food plan for the week. And, so the person buys the ingredients, they enjoy buying the ingredients, then they can prepare. So they're not having to think, oh, I've got nothing in the house, I need to go out and buy. And never buy it when you're hungry. That's another thing I would say. Never go into a shop when you're hungry, because then if you are a food addict, you're going to pick up something that's not going to be good for you. You make the wrong choices. So
you end up making all the wrong decisions, I think. Yes.
Anybody who has this, please make sure you've eaten something healthy before you go for a food shop. So that's one thing I'd say. But I think it's very important to get support and to also be kind to yourself and be compassionate, because a lot of people feel a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. They can't stop. They're overweight. People say to them, why can't you stop eating? You're overweight. You've got diabetes. You've got hypertension. You've got arthritis, which can, be from food addiction. There's all sorts of things that can set stuff off physically. And people feel a lot of shame and guilt, and why can't they stop eating? I've got a strong willpower, I'm determined, but I'm intelligent, but why can't I stop eating this? So again, it's giving yourself lots of love and lots of compassion, and that's where support groups come in, because they offer that compassion, that kindness, that caring, so that they don't keep falling back. And sometimes it's not linear. Recovery can be 1 step forward, 2 steps back, but each time it's not a mistake. It's like a learning. You learn from your mistakes, and this is the beautiful journey, is finding your relationship, a healthy relationship with food, but also finding a healthy relationship with yourself. And this is the whole crux of it, is finding that healthy relationship with you, finding that balance, finding that contentment, finding that peace within yourself. And it's sustainable. So when we talk about, let's go on a diet doesn't address the mental and the physical, the spiritual. It's just stop eating that. You've got to get to that certain weight, and that's it. That's why 99% of diets fail, because they haven't addressed the other issues that are underlying in that person's life. And so it's definitely, you've got to have that diet, you've got to do that. And with a diet, you jump on a diet, you jump off a diet. Diets are kind of temporary, whereas what we're suggesting is permanent, is long-term, is sustainable, is life-enhancing. It's not going to, a very good food plan. You don't go hungry. You're not starved. You're not restricted. And you're not hungry. So I think it's just very important to let people know that a food plan is not a diet.
Understood.
It's nurturing, it's kind, and it's loving.
And what do you think are some potential long-term consequences if this food addiction is left untreated?
If it's left untreated, we're talking about the chronic illnesses. So we're already looking at, for instance, in India, the Middle East, the West, the massive rise in diabetes, huge. It's frightening. And we're finding now diabetes type 1 are in youngsters as young as 9, 8, 9, 10. So we're looking at what I would call a pandemic of diabetes. And this is, a lot of it is down to the diet. It's down to the ultra processed foods that we eat. So long term, we're looking at diabetes type 2, which can be reversed in many, many cases with a good food plan. That's absolutely, diabetes type 2, that can be reversed, and reversed with even, I'm not going to say this for everybody, but without medication. And I've had many people who had diabetes, have gone through the program, and their diabetes has reduced massively. Their levels have reduced. So I would say diabetes, hypertension, especially with the salts in some of these foods. Again, hypertension, elevated blood pressure, constant. Again, cutting out these will reduce blood pressure. Blood pressure can go down quite easily. We're talking about obesity. Again, obesity, one factor with and not every food addict has obesity. That's what also I want to say. Anybody suffering from food addiction, there can be any weight, but it's their attitude around food. So I would say obesity, arthritis, again, that's another one because it causes inflammation in the body. So the foods that someone struggling with food addiction can cause inflammation in the body. It can cause arthritis, autoimmune issues, things like eczema. It can cause mental health problems. So they might feel depression because, again, their blood sugars keep going up and down. And when it's down, they feel tired, fatigued, they feel lethargic, they feel low self-worth, low self-esteem. So there's lots of things. It can also spike if a woman's going through menopause. It can make the menopause feel worse. And also it just affects mental health. Also, as a person gets older, when they're getting into their kind of later life, there's a lot of associations with dementia. The eating particular foods, can exacerbate dementia. We have an older population now in England, and we're looking at links between ultra-processed foods, sugars, and dementia. And that is a risk factor, and Alzheimer's as well. So it's affecting so many things that can be prevented. So it's not just about weight, it's about so many other things. So I really do say to anyone who is struggling, really try and find that help. Because long-term, your health is, in all aspects, is going to be so much better.
Absolutely. So, like you mentioned, that there are lots of consequences if it is left untreated. So, talking about today's world, like people are busy with their deadlines and tasks, and amidst all this, we often get very stressed, and which leads us to, like we mentioned, stress eating, binge eating, all these things. So do you think employers can create a supportive and inclusive work environment where they can promote healthy eating habits and help employees manage their food addiction?
Absolutely, 100%. I feel it's kind of a threefold thing. And I feel that the person would, need that support in the workplace. And for instance, in this country, we're starting to talk about food addiction and helping in the corporate setting, and how an employer can help their employees. And I think it's bringing, for instance, workshops to the corporate division and seeing how they can help. Maybe looking at things like the daily routine, how work's divided. If it's too much work, for instance, does that person really need to take on so much work? How is it distributed throughout the workplace? Also, if there's a structure where there's a cafeteria, for instance, then taking out as much of the ultra-processed foods as possible and replacing it with real food options rather than things like pastries and cakes and things like that. We could put like fruit, for instance, really healthy meals, so that the employee has a choice of healthy food rather than vending machines where there's snacks and even like sugary drinks like Coca-Cola. Terrible. I mean, I have a whole day talking about energy drinks, and that's another baddie. But I just feel that the workplace can employ mindful areas where if somebody's really stressed out, they can go like a breakout room where they can just chill, do some meditation or prayer or something like that. Having I would say not mental health workers, but mental health coaches, training people to help somebody who's in trouble in the workplace, somebody to talk to. So having counsellors, and they could be also from HR, work colleagues, occupational health, they're employing food addiction counsellors within a corporate structure, and mental health as well, I think is a really, really good way forward. So somebody can go and talk, and get some counselling, making sure that their structure's right. Because long term, we need, healthy employees and healthy workplace.
Yes, ultimately, employees make the most valuable assets of an organization, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I think a little bit of training, I think, would be fantastic. Training amongst the workforce, having the workforce become aware of what food addiction is, and binge eating and emotional eating, and providing strategies in a workshop. They can go away, but then also the next level up would be training maybe some of the members of the company, or bringing in such counsellors to help, or they can contact the counsellor out of work.
Most importantly, I believe people should be made aware of their food habits, like what to eat and what not to eat. I mean, having junk food is maybe once a month or twice a month is fine. Am I right?
Okay, so I normally say to my clients who maybe say have lots of junk food, okay, I first of all start to clean up their diet. Then they might say to me, but what if I just have it once or twice? And I'll go, okay, let's go out and experiment. Let's see what happens. So, let's say, okay, if I just have it once a week, okay, let's see what happens. They'll buy their burgers or whatever, their junk food. And this is not, I would say everybody's different. This is why I gauge everybody. But if that first bite and it kind of sets off that dopamine and sets off that memory of how good this is, oh my God, I need it again, then they start to think about, oh my God, I love that burger. Oh my goodness, I'm just going to have another one. And I'll see what happens. And invariably, I would say 70% will come back and go, I just bought another one, and I bought another one. So I have to gauge the client. Everybody's different. And if that's the case, then I'll say that is still a problem for you. And you're going to go down the slippery slope. But some people might go, once or twice, and they can do it. And that's great.
That self-control is needed.
That self-control is needed. But if your brain don't forget, the brain's very, very, very powerful. That as soon as you've had a bite of something that has big dopamine surges, big serotonin, those neurotransmitters, those feel-good neurotransmitters, it's very difficult for the brain to forget that. The brain likes joy. The brain likes to feel good. The brain likes to feel safe. And if these foods are making you feel like that, then it might set that off again. So it's like somebody with an alcohol problem that, I wouldn't go out and say, okay, and someone's had a really bad alcohol problem, okay, if you want to go and try it once or twice and see what happens, and because that they won't be able to stop again. So some people will find it difficult to stop. So I would say, anybody who says, right, I'm going to really get my food plan in order, then let me just try a burger. Okay, try it, but then be self-aware, as we talked about. Be self-aware. What's going on for you? Did you have that burger because you just fancied having it and it was nice? Or did you have that burger because you were stressed? Did you have that burger because, what are the reasons you're having that burger? Are you starting to think about burgers or starting to think about that food afterwards? Is it starting to become a preoccupation? Are you starting to get irritable or anxious until you eat it, and then when you eat it you feel guilty because you know you're going to have another one? So there's all sorts of different ramifications of that. So I would say it's about self-awareness. It's about what's going on for you. That's important.
Absolutely. Okay, Bunmi. So with this, we come to the end of today's session. So last but not the least, we still have one more question for you. So would you like to suggest some more valuable tips to our listeners?
I think the valuable tips is to get really kind of the number one tip is just make sure, three things. Are you hydrated? Are you sleeping? Because when you're not sleeping right, your stress levels go up. Yeah. And when you're not sleeping, your cortisol level goes up. That's like your adrenaline. that makes you want to eat more and eat the wrong things. So really making sure you get a really good night's sleep, maybe 7 hours, 8 hours of good sleep. Make sure you're hydrated. Yeah. Make sure you prepare your breakfast the night before. Make sure you know what you're eating during the week so you can plan it properly. So plan. Yeah, if you plan, you don't fail. And another tip is, look at how you manage stress. 3 things to manage your stress. And also another tip I like, which I really find very, very powerful, is finding, when things get a bit tough, finding gratitude. You know, find 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for in your day. Really does boost your feeling happier, feeling more well-rounded. So there's lots of little tips, but that's another tip that somebody can employ. But definitely look at all those 3 things, and that will start you on your journey to wellness.
Thank you so much, Bunmi, for sharing these beautiful suggestions. I had a great time talking to you today. I hope you also had a pretty good session today.
I did indeed. Yes, I did. And if anybody wants to reach out at all, if they can contact me through the foodaddictioncoach.co.uk on the website. And if any of the corporates are looking to help train some of their colleagues in food counselling, and become a food coach, then again, I am very much available to be able to train or to host a webinar for any corporates looking for that.
Yes, thank you so much for telling us that. So we'll surely look into it. And thank you so much for your time today. The entire session was very insightful for me, and I'm sure for all our listeners as well. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Vantage Fit Corporate Wellness Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage Fit Corporate Wellness Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and our YouTube channel for new episodes.